Hey, Dean.
Hey, Wags.
What you doing?
I'm ready to drink.
All right.
Lombardi's Legends podcast. We've got a former professional bartender here, Wags. What are you thinking?
I think today we should make a Bernie Blast. And, of course, we're going to be using Leaf Spirits vodka. And then let's just go ahead and get started here, Dane, shall we?
So let's do it.
First of all, what we're going to do is we're going to put 1.5 ounces of OJ in the bottom of an empty glass.
So this is like a health drink then?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now we're going to just cover that with ice. And then, now we're going to move over to the side. And if we could come in here and take a close look, we're going to pour in ingredients successively in separate mixing glass. We've got our vodka. Your choice of blue Caraco.
Blue Caraco.
Absolutely.
Do they have green and gold Caraco, do you know?
I don't think it would be necessary for green and gold.
Okay.
As much as I love where your head's at, Dane, it's blue. And then we're going to put in some ginger ale, 4.5 ounces of lemonade. All right. And now we're ready to mix. So if you have a mixer, we can just go ahead. This is an old bartender trick when you're at your tailgate. Just pour it back and forth. We've got our main drink glass with the OJ. We're ready to go.
I'll tell you what, I'm excited to drink some of this Leaf Spirit vodka. Whatever it's in, it's going to be really good. I know that.
All right. And finally, we are going to garnish with a lemon twist.
Okay. There's the gold portion of our green and gold. I like it.
There you go, Dan.
Thanks, Wags. Let me have a sip. It's delicious. Smooth Leaf Spirits vodka. Terrific. Thank you, Wags.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Go back, go!
Every year I know we gonna go hard. We been that team ever since Bart started. All my cheese heads go pack go. Ain't showing no mercy, cutting no slack, no. I ain't a bad sport and I'll even wish you good luck. Only thing I will.
Good evening and welcome into Lombardi's Legends podcast. I am Wags and joining me as always is Dane. And we are getting ready. The Packers have won 3 in a row. Wow. Our playoff hopes are alive and well, and we'll be welcoming or not so welcoming to the Minnesota Vikings here in week 17 coming to Lambeau Field. Dane, how are you doing this evening, man?
Great, man. Hey, Wags, happy holidays to you and anybody who's joining on Facebook. We haven't streamed the last couple of weeks. Our pods are still available, but we haven't streamed. And I'm doing great, man. We're on a 3-game winning streak. We've got a couple home games. We need a little bit of help. But who would have thought 6-7 weeks ago, if you would have told me that the next 2 games matter a heck of a lot and that we could potentially go and get a playoff berth, I tell you, maybe you might be a little crazy, and it's clearly not the case. This is a Packers team that's shown so much resilience. I am fired up. Week 17 is going to be jumping, and I'll tell you what, if the Commanders lose, look out, because then we're really talking. But this is Packer football at its finest. Playoffs started a few weeks ago. Week 17 is a playoff game as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and that's the key. Last week and the week before, we were talking about a lot of things that had to happen, including the Packers continuing to win. And now we're basically down. And I realize, yes, the Giants could lose both games. That's another way for the Packers to get in. To be honest with you, I don't see that as a very likely scenario at this point. So just hope for the Commanders to lose and the Packers to keep winning. And then we could be going into week 18 with a semi-playoff game on our hands with the Detroit Lions coming to Lambeau Field and the Packers being able to control their own destiny. So how things have changed in just 1 week. And it started, of course, with getting a big win down in Miami on Sunday, on Christmas Day. So, Dane, that was a nice gift from Santa to all of us in Packer Nation. So let's just maybe do a quick recap before we get into the Vikings game. What were some of the things that really stood out to you? I think, you could cover a lot of different things, but for me, it started with the turnovers. The Packers were able to generate 4 turnovers, 3 of them in the fourth quarter, one big one at the end of the first half. But I think that was the story of the game. And then you can get into some of the nuts and bolts of some of how the Packers were able to come away with the victory from there. But didn't have to start with those turnovers and defense stepping up and getting 3 interceptions in the fourth quarter to steal that game.
I mean, it's huge, right? This is a Packer team that, generally speaking, when they get turnovers outside of this year, and they get at least 1 turnover, they win the football game. So this, the football is about getting those turnovers, and I thought the defense did a great job. It was a tough first half, man. It was tough sledding early in the game, but the Packers defense took a lot of advantage. In the second half, I thought that they were that ball hawking defense, and frankly, kind of who we've been expecting them to be a lot of the year. A number of guys stepped up at different key moments. We weren't relying on one guy here or there, and that's what we're going to need more of, Wags. We've seen this Packer team in previous iterations. When they get hot, sure, the offense is humming, but really the defense maybe isn't your Iron Curtain defense, so to speak. But generally, when this Packer team's rolling, it's because they come up with key stops in key moments in football games. And last week we saw them do it against Tua and this Miami Dolphins team. The defense was opportunistic at the most important and key times, and they were able to make some major stops, and the offense was able to go ahead and put the game away. So huge opportunity, I think, for this defense to continue to stay hot, and it's not going to get easier. And frankly, it's going to get a lot harder, I think, against Justin Jefferson and this Minnesota Vikings offense. But this is a Packers defense that's rolling. This is a Packers defense that's trusting in each other a lot more than we saw earlier in the year. And this is a Packers defense that seems to be clicking quite a bit more. So I am actually pretty optimistic going into this week.
Yeah, and speaking, maybe just sticking with the defense, in addition to those takeaways, you've got to give them some credit. Both the players and the defensive coaching staff clearly made some adjustments after
Yes.
giving up some big plays, both to Jalen Waddle in the long 84-yard touchdown pass, and then a couple of long throws to Tyreek Hill, and really in the run game. They were getting gashed pretty good in the first couple of series. It seemed like the Dolphins were just running at will, but they were able to hold Miami to just 24 yards rushing in the second half.
Incredible.
And so I think, once they were able to do that and kept those both Waddle and Tyreek Hill in front of them and pretty much in check. I didn't realize they still both made a couple of catches in the second half, but they're going to do that. They've done that to every team in the league. So I think they did about as well as you could do against those guys in the second half. But to me, the second story of the game for the defense was being able to make some adjustments, because it looked like it was going to be vintage rushing game for Raheem Mostert, and that just brings back nightmares. But they were able to strip him. Jaron Reed with a big strip and a recovery fumble late in the first half. And I think that was may have arguably been the biggest play of the game, because Miami was just about to cross midfield, and at worst it looks like they're going to go probably get in field goal range. But that's a big swing, because that got the Packers within 7 points before the half. And then they were able to go and score in that first series of the second half, a nice long drive, and it's just a different ball game. Miami was never really able to get a lot of rhythm on the ground after that. It looked like the Packers, with all respect to Dean Lowry going out with an injury, but with Devontae Wyatt and TJ Slayton getting some more snaps, and obviously with Jaron Reed having a heck of a game, I thought Kenny Clark was his usual active self. That looked like a different defensive front than what we've seen all season. So, you never like to see guys get hurt, but let's just call it how it is, because you and I both have been calling for a change there since the heck before the season started with Dean Lowry. So, unfortunate for Dean. It's, but I think it might actually get us the best players on the field on that defensive line here down the stretch. So, so that was another big thing, I think, with the defense. On the offensive side, Dane, we're going to have to be a lot sharper and more efficient this week against the Vikings. To be honest, we can't rely on 4 takeaways. That would sure be nice. I would take it, but 2 for 14 on third down and 2 for 5 in the red zone. That's not going to get it done. So, what are some adjustments? Not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but what did you think of the offense and the lack of efficiency at times? Not necessarily playing complementary football. Only scored 9 points off of a 93-yard kick return from Kayshawn Nixon and 2 interceptions. And a fumble recovery for that matter. So we need to turn those opportunities into touchdowns and not field goals. And we have to be better on third down. So talk to me about what you were seeing from the offense and the lack of efficiency against this Miami defense this past week.
Well, I'll tell you what, Wags. I thought that one of the big punches in the gut early in the game was Josh Nyman's injury. That totally shuffled things around. Royce Newman needed to come in a pinch and play at that right tackle spot. Now, I thought Royce actually played pretty good football overall for what you can expect from him, but that did really shake things up. I thought Royce was pretty good in pass pro, run protection, not as solid, not as strong. And anytime you lose a guy along the offensive line that's been as consistent as Josh Nijman, it's going to make things, I think a little bit more difficult. But what I'd like to see this Packers offense continue to do is ride the running game as much as possible. And yet again, we saw moments where Aaron Jones just didn't get touches on the field. And I thought that was actually pretty noticeable. At one point, I actually thought Aaron Jones may have been hurt. There was a critical third down in the second half where Patrick Taylor got a catch and converted a first down. And we love Patrick, but I was shocked that, A.J. Dillon was getting a ton of touches and then Aaron Jones didn't get the touch. Next series, Aaron Jones is out there on the field. So I'm kind of curious what the share, this timeshare is at the running back position. And, I think it's plain as day that Aaron Jones is probably the most dynamic player on this Packers offense, consistently speaking. So I was a little surprised that he didn't get as much run as he would get, if I was a head coach, I guess I should say. But all of that's to say, I'd like to see more consistency out of the running game, but I would like to see a little bit more of our biggest playmakers getting touches. That includes Aaron Jones.
Yeah, and I completely agree. Josh Nijman is probably one of our best run blockers up front on the offensive line. So that's definitely to make an impact. Aaron Jones only got 25 snaps in this
Are you
game.
surprised by that? I don't understand that. I really don't get it.
Well, he's been listed on the injury report going back to before the bye. I thought he was feeling a little bit better, but maybe he didn't get as much work as we expected against the Rams either. And so it seems apparent that he might still be nursing some of those injuries. He would be out on the field more than that. So it wasn't just that he wasn't getting touches, which has been a sore spot, I think, for us and most Packer fans all season. But he ended up with 6 carries and 2 catches. So, it's a 33% touch rate based on the number of snaps he got. It's not bad. That's actually pretty high for a running back. So in some ways, it makes me think that he is probably dealing with some of those injuries a little bit more than what we know. And perhaps a couple of those series, he just wasn't ready to get out there. And so they were holding him back. He was able to get in at the end of the game, like you said earlier, for that big 18-yard run. So that was big in that moment. So I'll be curious to see if he's healthier this week, because I was expecting big things out of Aaron Jones both of the last 2 weeks. But when you're only out on the field for just over a third of your offensive snaps, and you're also only converting 2 for 14 on third down, it's hard to establish and get a rhythm and a run game going. You've got to get first downs in order to really run the ball. So the game flow and what you got to give the defense of the Miami Dolphins, I guess, some credit. They were really pursuing really well. It looked like they had a pretty good angle on a lot of those stretch runs that they like to run off tackle. And unfortunately, there just wasn't a lot of holes for either Aaron Jones or A.J. Dillon to get much going on the ground. Thankfully, we were able to be somewhat efficient in our first and second down passing situations, because that otherwise it would have been really bad. Second and fourth quarter offensively, we just weren't very sharp. Second quarter, I think in particular, we just really struggled with everything, run, pass, and Aaron Rodgers had some great throws in this game, but he was not sharp at all in that second quarter. I thought he came out pretty well the first quarter. Second quarter really struggled,
Missing balls,
and the
yeah.
offense couldn't get anything going. So, so we're gonna need. And I asked you last week if we could get some vintage Aaron Rodgers performances. He was okay against this Dolphins team, but I didn't think he was all that great for Aaron Rodgers. So we're going to need him to be better too. And then, of course, Christian Watson getting hurt and missing the second half. The way he was involved, got 8 targets in the first half. I think it's hard to sometimes adjust to a game plan on the fly when you've got someone like that's clearly that heavily involved in the pass game. So, so I think those were the main things that really stood out to me. But definitely need to be better situationally in both third down and in the red zone. So I'm hoping that with a week to game plan, we can find some other ways to get some more guys involved and to take some pressure off of that wide receiver group in the pass game.
Right. So you mentioned Christian Watson, and as we start to transition into this injury report, he's somebody that did not practice yesterday, did not practice again today. Coach LaFleur, had said that he thought Watson was going to be able to practice in some capacity today. It looks like that didn't happen. How concerned should we be after the Thursday no practice of Christian Watson not playing on Sunday? Because I'll be honest, I was really proud of this Packers offense in the second half to be able to, win a football game without Christian Watson, because he's been such a catalyst for winning some games in the last couple of weeks. So how important is it that Christian Watson gets out there even in a limited capacity on Sunday?
Well, it would be nice, but I guess I don't think he's probably going to play. I mean, we'll see if he gets out there and practices tomorrow on Friday, but it looks like if he's a DNP and he was pulled completely and was actually in street clothes on the sideline in the second half. Now, it didn't seem like there was a huge concern that this is a major injury, so that's the good thing. However, based on his injury history this season, I hate to say it, but he's just had a hard time staying healthy. He's missed a lot of games this year, so I don't know if it's just a lot of bad luck. I'm sure that's part of it, but he his history doesn't tell me that he's going to be able to turn around on a shorter week here and be able to be prepared to go here on Sunday. So we'll see. Now, that being said, in a one game situation, we can have the whole week to prepare and game plan for not having Christian Watson. It's certainly an impact. Thankfully, we saw Alan Lazard was able to make a long catch against the Dolphins on Sunday, so we can utilize that in a one game situation. Tight ends were able to get a little bit more involved, not heavily involved, but it was great to see Mercedes Lewis make some big time catches, both the touchdown and that long catch down the sideline. And then Bob Tunyon only had one catch, big catch though on the final drive of the game. DeGuara and Tunyon just haven't really been involved at all as receivers in the pass game for a while now. So is that something that the Packers could be able to adjust and game plan this week to give a few more opportunities for those tight ends to get involved, especially since it looks like David Bakhtiari is going to be ready, hopefully, to be back. He's been practicing, returning from that emergency appendectomy. So, you have to figure that with Bakhtiari back, and I saw Josh Nijman was practicing, but even if he's not ready to go, you figure Zach Tom probably flips over to right tackle if Nijman's not ready to go. Feel pretty good about that situation for the Packers offensive line. And so maybe they're able to get away with sending those tight ends out and being involved in the pass game a little bit more rather than holding them back to block quite as much. So we'll talk about this Vikings front. They can get some pressure. They've got some familiar guys, obviously, but I think there's ways that the Packers can be prepared in game plan without Christian Watson. Certainly, it's great if we have him out there. It's better if we have him out there. What he's meant to this Packers offense and getting this offense playing at a higher level is very clear. There's no argument there, but certainly this isn't a world-beating Vikings defense, so we should be able to find other ways to win battles and exploit them and be able to be efficient out there on Sunday.
I mean, how fortunate are we that you talk about Zach Tom? I mean, Zach Tom was a 5th-round draft pick, right? 4th round, 5th-round draft pick for the Packers this last offseason. So he's a rookie, deep draft pick. And we're talking about like, oh, yeah, so, if Bakhtiari can go, we'll just – and Yash is hurt, we'll just flip him to the right side. I mean, that says so much about how good Zach Tom has been for this Packers offensive line this year. Dare I say he's a mini Elton Jenkins. He's a guy who's been successful and plays across the offensive line. And folks, let me tell you, most NFL teams are fortunate if they can field a decent starting 5. And to have somebody like Zach Tom on this offensive line that can swing around and theoretically play any of the 5 positions is so damn important to this Packers team. And it helps with the engine and keeps things going. So I got to give Zach Tom a little bit of a shout out, some love. Wags, the other major injury, I think, on this Packers injury report on Thursday is Keisean Nixon. Keisean Nixon has been significant, to say the least, for this Packers team in the last number of weeks. Did not practice yesterday, did not practice yet again today. You hearing anything? Are we expecting Romeo Doubs to return kicks and Randall Cobb to return punts? What do you think is going to happen with Keisean Nixon?
Yeah. Well, again, similar to Christian Watson, with not practicing so far this week. And with I think it was a groin injury. Sometimes with those soft tissue injuries, you have to be a little bit concerned that might be something that could linger, and they may not be ready to go out there right away that following week. So we'll see. They could just be giving him a little bit of extra rest in lieu of that being a soft tissue injury as well. And let's see if he can get out there tomorrow in limited capacity, see how it feels, and that I think will probably be the plan if I had to guess. Again, it didn't seem like there was any apparent or specific play that I saw that he got hurt. I think the radio crew I was listening to the game, they thought it happened on the long return, but he was out there on the next kickoff. So if that's the case, it wasn't like something acute or immediately apparent. So in any event, it's something that's clearly affecting him a little bit. That could be a big loss at this point. Same with Christian Watson. I mean, we're talking about 2 guys that have really been true difference makers for the Packers in the last few weeks and getting the special teams turned around and this offense turned around. So, these aren't minor injuries. These aren't guys that we came into the season counting on, but these are pretty major injuries at this point if they're not able to go. So I despite what I said about a 1-game plan for Christian Watson, I mean, the same is going to have to be true in the special teams, the return game. I expect it will be Randall Cobb on punts and Romeo Doubs on kick returns. The kick returns that Doubs got, he was okay. Certainly didn't have the electricity that Keisean Nixon has. You could tell that he's not quite as comfortable in that role as Keisean Nixon clearly is. So I think this is one of those weeks where you kind of just put a Band-Aid on it and maybe tell the guys not to be quite as aggressive. Let's just take some touchbacks. Let's take some fair catches, and let's just get out on the field and without any further damage done. I trust Randall Cobb, but that hasn't been a big responsibility that he's had in quite some time. So he's usually back there and when we're in our punt safe situations, if they're going to try to pin back late in the game, big situation, sure-handed. But, so we'll get through it. It's not anything that we can't get through, but certainly would be nice if Keyshawn Nixon, depending on how he feels, is able to go, because that's a difference maker. The Packers had truly amazing field position as a result of having Keyshawn Nixon out on the field in their first two possessions and got 10 points out of it. It wasn't because the offense did anything amazing. It was because
Right.
Keyshawn Nixon single-handedly put them in a position to score some points. So yeah, that's a big impact. I dare say that might be as much, if not more, of an impact than Christian Watson missing this game.
Wow. Wow. No, I mean that is high praise, right? But that shows Keyshawn Nixon has been flipping the field. He flips the field for this Packers offense every time he seems to seemingly touches the ball. He's just that dynamic. Wags, outside of these injuries for the Packers, I mean, I would argue those are the most significant injuries. Aaron Rodgers is back. On the practice field as a limited participant. He's going to go on Sunday. There, we have zero doubt. Aaron is, if he's going to go, he's going to go. But Minnesota, Garrett Bradbury, the starting center, did not practice the last couple of days. This is going to sound kind of silly. I kind of wish he would play. And I'm going to tell you why. Kenny Clark has dominated Garrett Bradbury since he's come into the league. Like Garrett Bradbury has had the worst performances of his time probably in football pads against Kenny Clark. So Bradbury, not a participant the last couple of days, but I don't know if that helps the Packers because Kenny Clark just seems to have his number.
It's so funny you said that because I knew you were going to highlight Garrett
I have
Bradbury,
to.
and I was going to say, Dane, the way that you've praised and really seen Kenny Clark dominate Bradbury ever since he's come into the league, and you've highlighted that almost every matchup we've had
Every
against
game.
Minnesota the last couple of years. Are we sure that we don't want him out there? So
Yeah.
you took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, look, he's a good player. And certainly I think it does benefit the Packers if he's not out there, even in spite of that matchup. So we'll see. He's got the back injury. That could also be one of those situations where they're just giving a little bit of extra rest, monitoring him over the course of the week and see how he goes. Vikings have something to play for here. They're fighting to get a 1 or 2 seed. I don't think they need this game, obviously, nearly as much as the Packers do. So I would expect that if they're in doubt, probably will go ahead and rest Bradbury or any other players that pop up on the injury report here, because the reality is that they've got their division locked up. They're going to be a top 3 seed, and they're going to have a home game in week 1. Catching Philly is not out of the question, but still a pretty big long shot considering Philly holds the tiebreaker over Minnesota. So I think just the reality is that if someone like Bradbury is kind of questionable, my guess is he probably won't go. So we might be seeing someone, a backup shift in there on the Minnesota offensive line. The way this defensive line played last week, if we can replicate that, it's not just Bradbury versus Kenny Clark. I think this defensive line specifically could really cause some problems for this Minnesota front. Minnesota's got a talented offensive line, but they've had some real problems being consistent in the run game. They've given up a lot of sacks. Kirk Cousins has taken a ton of hits. Part of the reason why he's throwing so much is they find themselves in a lot of throwing situations. Unfortunately for the opposition, he's still got some really good receivers to throw to, so they've been productive when they've given him time to throw. But the Packers need to be able to replicate what other teams have done and put a lot of pressure on Kirk Cousins. We've seen Cousins at his best and at his worst against the Packers. He's had some pretty solid games in Lambeau Field, but he's also had some real stinkers at Lambeau Field. So I this is a late season game coming to Lambeau outside. Vikings have not had to play outside much in the second half of the season. And I think
Right.
the elements could come into play, especially if we're able to get some pressure on Kirk Cousins early and really force him to have to make some decisions with the football. If we can, you know, get some situations where we can get a couple turnovers. We really have to take advantage of that because we've seen what the Vikings are able to do in putting up points in a hurry. They just made that big comeback, the biggest comeback in NFL history against the Colts a couple weeks
Yeah.
ago, and despite pitching a second half shutout against the Dolphins, I'm not like super confident that this Packer defense is going to come in and shut this Viking offense down. So I think it starts with that defensive line. That's one of the potential matchups, Dane. But I think it'd be really important to see if there's some ways that we can really figure out how to slow Dalvin Cook down and this Vikings rushing attack and force them into more of those passing situations. Despite how good they've been at times and how good Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen can be, that's certainly going to, in the long run, I think, play to the Packers' advantage. Um, so I do want to flip and ask you a question then. But before we get too much further into this Vikings offense against Packers defense, should we take a quick break
Yeah, let's do
and
it.
talk about our sponsor? Yeah, why don't we do that? So let's talk about DraftKings Sportsbook, official sports betting partner of the NFL, and of course the with DraftKings right now, this holiday season they are a go-to betting source. For me, especially, you've got same game parlays, easy and fast payouts, and player prop options. So if you're a new customer and you bet just $5 on any NFL team to win their game, you get $150 in free bets if they do.
Wags, that's nuts. And check this out. Right now, everyone can earn up to 100% boost with DraftKings stepped up same game parlays. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, place a same game parlay, and combine multiple bets. Which team will win, player props, point totals, and more. The more legs you add, the bigger the boost, the bigger your shot to win big. And Wags, I mean, there's great matchups this week. We're recording on a Thursday night, but there's so many good there's NFC North division rivals, Chicago and Detroit. But you know, I look across the board. I mean, we're keeping an eye on the New York Giants. They're playing the Indianapolis Colts. They've been feisty. They're not great, but they've been feisty this year. How about the 7-8 Tampa Bay Buccaneers team against Carolina? Carolina 6-9. Look out! I mean, there's so many good matchups this week that I can't say enough about how fun it's going to be. We're Packer fans. If you're listening, you're a huge Packer fan. But all these other matchups are that much sweeter and that much more interesting with DraftKings Sportsbook app.
Yeah. How about finding a same game parlay to bet with the Browns beating Commanders? So
How about
that would be a nice game. If you're afraid of jinxing your bets in the Packer game, just go move over to that game. And there's lots of reason to cheer for the Browns, but that might be one more to give yourself one extra ones to really get into that game. So, folks, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code TPPN. Place a $5 bet on any NFL team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code TPPN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. All right. So, Dane, we were talking a little bit about this defense. And yeah, Vikings offensive line has surrendered 45 sacks on the season. They're in the bottom 5 of the league and most sacks allowed. Part of that is because the Vikings have thrown the ball so much. They've thrown the ball over 600 times already this season, which is 100 more than the Packers. But believe it or not, I was actually a little bit surprised in terms of passing efficiency. The Vikings pass offense is like basically identical to what the Packers have done all season. And that's a surprise to me because we know that the Packers have had some struggles and some ups and downs in the pass game. But here we're talking about the 12-3 first place Minnesota Vikings. And, you know, they're the numbers say that this is not a really good team. In fact, this Vikings team, in some ways, reminds me of the first season under Coach LaFleur.
Yep.
They've got a first-year
Definitely.
coach of their own, and they're 11-0 in one-score games right now, which is just ridiculous. So it's one of those things where you got to give them credit for winning those close games. It was the opposite last year for the Vikings, and sometimes those things can go back and forth. Clearly, they're doing some things right to execute and finish at the end of the game. So you can't sit here and call it all luck. But that being said, this is not a dominating football team that's going away out there and really their record is probably much better than what the team is. And so it's going to be interesting to see what adjustments the Packers make. It's been a long time since these teams faced off way back in week one. And so I'm curious, just sticking with that pass rush, what are some things that we can do outside of just winning some of those one-on-one matchups and trying to get some additional pressure on Kirk Cousins this week? Because that's when the Packers seem to win against the Vikings, is not having to send blitzes. Kirk has been pretty good against blitzes. So if they're able to get pressure with this front, then that could be a big difference maker. So I'm just kind of curious if there's some other things that the coaching staff could do on the defense side of the ball to frustrate Kirk Cousins in this pass offense.
Well, Wags, I'll tell you what, and I hate to say it like this, but it's just I'm being truthful, and that's why we do this podcast. The injury to Dean Lowry, as you mentioned at the top of this podcast, has opened the door for Devontae Wyatt. Wyatt, in limited snaps, has been remarkably efficient. He makes major impact plays. I watched him last week in the snaps that he was able to play, that he being Devontae Wyatt. He was able to rush the passer in a tremendous way. I saw the athleticism of a first-round pick from Devontae Wyatt. I did. And I'm not blowing smoke, folks. I watched him take on a blocker and then get around the edge and then lay the shoulder down and then cut through. And that is not an easy play to make at the NFL level from a big man like Devontae. So I think the first impact player that we need to look at in talking about a pass rush where we're not manufacturing blitzes is Devontae Wyatt. If he has a day and Kenny Clark continues to perform at the level we know Kenny can play at, this is a Packers defensive line that all of a sudden is incredibly problematic for the Minnesota Vikings, the Detroit Lions, and anybody else that they have to face, particularly in the pass rush. So, and I sincerely mean that. I think Devontae Wyatt is a first-round pick. I think he's that good. And I think that he's coming on, he's getting better. So I'm going to look at that right away, Wags, and that kind of inside-out pass rush that forces Kirk Cousins off his mark, makes him kind of roll out a little bit and get those happy feet. Kirk Cousins is very good in the pocket. Kirk Cousins is mediocre to slightly below mediocre when he has to get outside of the pocket and try to deliver a pass. So I'm going to watch him, and then I'm going to watch JJ Enagbare. Somebody that I know you've highlighted in the past that you and I both really like. He's been tremendous for a rookie coming off the edge. And he's somebody who's got a really good motor. He's somebody that's working on his hand placement. He's a work in progress, but he's already an impact player as a rookie. So I want to see the Packers really deploy some of these young guys and have trust in some of the young guys. They drafted them for a reason. I think that they're coming into their own. And if we're going to go anywhere in the season, it's because some of these young guys have stepped up. Rashawn Gary injury has been a massive hole on this pass rush for this Packers defense. But a Devontae Wyatt and a JJ Enagbare getting some blitz rush, getting some pressure on Kirk Cousins is going to go a long way in this Packers defense performing on Sunday. And I think that they can really create the pressure that causes Kirk Cousins to make some mistakes and causes this Packers defense to have some plus plays.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Also, Preston Smith, if he can continue playing the way he's been, 5 sacks in the last 5 games, and
Unreal.
honestly, just really raised his level of play in the last second half of the season. He's he's playing exceptional football, not just in pass rush, but really in the run game. And this is an area the Packers have struggled at times. But I also think one of the things that's made a big difference to me with both TJ Slayton and Devontae Wyatt out there is they were actually moving their blockers down the line of scrimmage. Dean Lowry, oftentimes, and I for those that are listening, I'm holding up the hands. He would stalemate blockers, but he wasn't moving blockers. And you really need to move your line towards the rushing attack, and that's what can give some of those guys at the second and third level some clearer angles to be able to come up and make some plays and really make some tackles. But because Dean Lowry, unfortunately, too often he would lock up and he wasn't actually pushing the line down. And so when Preston doing his job and really pinching the edge, there's nobody there from the interior to close those gaps with Dean Lowry out on the field. Whereas with what I was seeing last week, with Devontae Wyatt and TJ Slayton, is those guys were moving their offensive linemen off their spots and really engaging. And that was closing those gaps down significantly. And now the running backs have to make a decision to cut, and that's going to give guys like Quay Walker a lot of additional time to make decisions and come down to make a hit. So that to me was what we were seeing. And so Dane, I went back and rewatched this closely this morning because I really wanted to make sure that what I was hearing and seeing on Sunday matched with reality. And so that's something that excites me because those young guys are hard to move off the spots. They're just big body, they're strong, they're athletic, and they've got that motor in the lower body. And so if they continue to do that, this is a great week for that because Dalvin Cook, he's someone that can be very explosive if he gets a gap or a seam in the hole. And he's not going to take it to the house every time that happens, but it puts a lot of pressure on that second and third level to really support the run game. Where Dalvin Cook doesn't do as well is when he has to make that cutback and doesn't have his initial hole. I don't think he's the best running back in terms of his vision, honestly. So if the Packers defensive line and that interior defensive line plays complementary to what a guy like Preston Smith has been doing most of this season, all of a sudden there's less gaps for those running backs to find space and find wiggle room and gash you for 8-10 yards. And those 8 to 10 yard plays become 2 to 3 yard gains or less. So that's what we saw in the second half against the Dolphins. And so that gives me encouragement that potentially we could actually have a defense that can occasionally stop opposing running games. We just didn't have the right personnel out on the field. Again, with all respect to Dean Lowry,
I agree.
We have now cleared the runway for these young guys to come in and show us what we're going to do. I'm not saying they're going to be perfect. There might be some growing pains. They might make some boneheaded plays. I don't know. But I just think their athletic profile and their ability to be able to, get off blocks and really to move that line of scrimmage could be a big game changer for this Packer defense. So, Dane, that's kind of an exciting prospect because now you're making the Vikings potentially slightly more one-dimensional. That being said, yeah, go ahead. Jump in.
Well, I want to ask you then, as a follow-up, is it safe to say the road to the playoffs could potentially be on the shoulders of Kenny Clark, Jaron Reed, TJ Slayton, and Devontae Wyatt? I mean, if those four guys ball out over the next 2 weeks, I sincerely think this is a Packer team that's heading to the playoffs.
I agree. And here's the thing. We're going back to before the season started, and Coach Barry's taking some flack from us for calling this defensive line special. And we haven't seen it most of the season, but I'm not ready to jump on that train quite yet based on 1.5 football. And they've had other moments this season, don't get me wrong, but I'll be really anxious to see how those guys play this Sunday, because if they can continue what they were doing in that second half against the Dolphins, that's a real game changer. This secondary has maybe underperformed at times this year, but if you give them enough opportunities where the other teams in a long down and distance pass situation, I feel like we're going to come out ahead more often than not. This is a good secondary, folks, and they've gotten beat at times, but a lot of times in the first, 10, 12 games of the season, opposing teams were not seeing many third downs, and when they did, it was 3rd and 2 or 3. But when they're getting 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12, we've seen some conversions, but more often than not, this Packer defense in those situations seems to really lock things down for the most part. So being able to slow down the run game is something we've been asking for years and years and years. So I'm really anxious to see if we've got the right guys out there to be able to do that moving forward.
Wags, and we have some awesome comments coming in from some new folks joining. What's up? Lloyd says, got to stop Cook running around the end. You mentioned Preston Smith. I mean, so underrated, right? Such an underrated player on this team. We sing his praises every week, but Preston Smith's going to set that edge this week. I look at this Minnesota Vikings offensive line, and Darren Saw on one end and Brian O'Neill on the other. I love the matchup this week. I really do. Week 1, throw that crap out the window. I think this is a Packers defense that's starting to feel themselves a little bit. I want to see Preston Smith ball out. I think that he's going to be able to set that edge, and he's going to make for a really difficult running lanes for Cook.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, and that's a good observation, Lloyd. We were talking about that earlier.
Very
If we're
good.
able to be able to pinch down and force some cutbacks from Dalvin Cook, I just don't think he has the ability and the vision to be able to make the Packers defense pay. So big key right there. Dane, anything else for the Packers defense against this Vikings offense that you want to hit on? I mean, we kind of didn't even really talk much about Justin Jefferson. It was more in the
Right.
context of Kirk Cousins and the pass offense. He obviously torched us in week 1. Is there something from a game plan or schematic standpoint that you expect them to do differently?
I hope
To be
so.
able to,
Yeah, I hope
yeah,
so.
I mean,
Justin Jefferson has been he's not only torched the Packers in week 1, he's torched so many teams this year. He's a remarkable talent. I want to see more aggression. I want to see Jair Alexander matched up on him. We pay Jair. Jair is flowing right now. I think he's playing his best football of the year. I want to see Jair matched up on Justin Jefferson. I want to give Jair help over the top. And then I want to see Kirk Cousins beat the Packers with all the other weapons made available to him. But I want to see this Packers defense be aggressive. I want to see some man approach with a guy over the top on Justin Jefferson. I want to see Jair trying to jam him at the line of scrimmage. And if we can take Justin Jefferson away from this this Vikings offense, I think this Packers defense is going to have a lot of success because I do have a lot of faith in our run defense against Dalvin Cook. I really do. Call me crazy. I do. But Justin Jefferson is the number 1 primary guy we need to take away from this Vikings offense.
yeah, I completely agree.
And better, easier said than done, right, Wags? I mean, Jefferson's a freak. He's top 3 wide receiver, top 2 wide receiver in this league. So he's an absolute beast. But we have the highest paid corner in the league for a reason. So I want to see this Packers defense rely on the guys that Goody believes in.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting this past week is Chris Barnes is getting snaps out there on Packers when they're in a dime defense, and he got 5 snaps.
Great
One of the things that I think is a little bit underrated with this inside linebacker group, we talk about the defensive line, and outside linebackers, but they really need to make sure that they get their depth in passing situations. So, it's certainly their main job is to come up and make plays against the run. I understand that, but there's been times this year where they've been gotten a little bit out of position, pinched down a bit, and they've that's where those crossing routes and just getting killed over the middle can make a big difference. But if Devontae Campbell and Quay Walker, those are guys going to be out there majority of the snap, are able to get their depth, that can make a big difference in taking away some of those 15 to 20-yard routes that the Vikings really feasted on the Packers in week one. Justin Jefferson, obviously the main one that was the culprit of that. So it's easy to think about playing pass defense with the safety help over the top, but an underrated aspect of being able to take some of those initial options away is to be able to get the depth on the first level with your interior linebackers, because now you've got, as a quarterback, you're going to have to kind of look away from throwing across the middle, because there's a higher likelihood that those passes could get deflected or picked off. We saw Devontae Campbell do that in the fourth quarter last week, as he got some nice depth and was able to make that interception. So that's going to be another big key in this pass game this week as well, is to make sure that our linebackers are able to play support, maybe not be the primary coverage, but to try to take some of those things away underneath as well.
That's great observation, Wags. So, Wags, we're like 50 minutes into this podcast. We haven't even talked about the Packer offense because there's so much to talk about. We're so excited, if you couldn't tell. This is a team that's trying to make the playoffs, right? And
we probably should have done a recap on Monday, but that's
I know.
okay.
We just love this team. We can't help ourselves. So let's look. This is a middle of the road defense, as far as I'm concerned, for the Minnesota Vikings. This is a team that wins close games. They've got some guys that pop out. I mean, of course, Zadarius Smith is somebody who's going to look to try to get some revenge against the Packers. Eric Hendricks, longtime player. But Wags, looking at this defense, are there any guys that really pop out to you? How do you see this Packers offense trying to maneuver and exploit this Minnesota Vikings defense led by Ed Donatel, former Packers defensive coordinator from the Wayback Machine back in 4th and 26, back in 2003, 2004 era? Ed Donatel is now the defensive coordinator for the Vikings. How do the Packers try to take advantage of Ed Donatel and this Vikings defense?
Well, it starts with running the football. In week one, they were not able to get any rhythm offensively. And it really, a lot of that was, we didn't have David Bakhtiari. We didn't have Elton Jenkins. We had some new guys that were shuffling around on the offensive line. So there were injuries, we were beat up. And, obviously, the first play, big drop from Christian Watson. If he's not able to go this week, it's not like the Packers can go out there and replicate that. But, I don't know how healthy Aaron Jones will be for Sunday, but regardless, we expect him to be out there along with A.J. Dillon, and we need to get this run game going. We didn't run the ball well enough last week against the Dolphins, and this is a Vikings defense that I think can be exploited against the run. And so that's going to have to be the first thing that we get going to be able to have any rhythm, convert third downs. So I expect to see a healthy dose of that. One of the things that you have to avoid, though, is getting into too many third down situations. So it's a difficult balance. We were 2 for 14 on third down. I would have really preferred that the Packers didn't have 14 third downs to have to deal with to begin with. So that's a big number. So if we can, be more efficient on first and second down, we don't see as many third downs. We're moving the chains, and then you're not in situations where you decide to go for it on fourth down or having to punt the ball away. So it's difficult, because if you try to really establish the run and you're getting 4 or 5 yards to run, then you might find yourself in a lot of third downs. So that being said, if they're third and short, we've got to be more efficient on third down as well. And that will make a difference. The Vikings do have a pretty good pass rush. We were very familiar with Daniel Hunter and Zadarius Smith. So we don't want to be in a lot of situations where it's 3rd and 8 to 3rd and 10 to 3rd and 12. They're going to be aggressive in those situations. They do like to bring their interior linebackers, bring a little bit of extra pressure. Aaron does well against the blitz traditionally. However, when you've got 2 really good outside pass rushers, when you bring extra guys up the middle, even Aaron can have a little bit of difficulty with that, because he's not going to have as much room to roll and move around in the pocket. He can't step up, and he's got pressure coming around the edge doesn't give them a lot of room or a lot of ways to maneuver and get out of there. So certainly, if the Packers are not in those third and long situations, that minimizes their Vikings defense ability to really bring that pressure. So that's going to be the biggest thing. I'm anxious to see if David Bakhtiari is actually cleared and is ready to play. Sounds like they're optimistic, but until he's actually out there on Sunday, with what we've seen from David, I can't sit here and say that with any certainty that he's going to be. So I think that's a big thing. If Josh Nyman's able to be out there on the right side, or if it's Zach Tom, I'm feeling a lot more confident in our offensive line's ability to maintain and hold up against that pressure for the defense of the Vikings. And then as far as the pass game, Dane, I think if Christian Watson's not able to go, we've seen so little of our young tight ends in Bob Tunyon and Josiah DeGuara getting involved in the pass game. So I don't know if it's a little bit out on a limb to expect them to suddenly be getting a heavier dose of the game plan this week. But there's not a lot of other places I feel like we can go. Certainly Romeo Dobbs can do his thing, but that's not the release valve. I guess I don't feel terribly comfortable relying on Romeo Dobbs, Randall Cobb, and Alan Lazard to go out there and really be a consistent part of this pass game. With respect to those guys, I would like to see us become a little bit more well-rounded, and let's see if we can utilize those tight ends. Am I crazy to think that we can figure out a way to get those guys more involved? Because I think this would be a good week to be able to do that.
No, I mean, I think that's a really good point, Wags. And Alan Lazard's got to catch the ball. So that's the first thing. So he had a number of drops. I didn't think he had his best performance last week against Miami. So when the wide receivers have an opportunity to catch the ball, they need to catch the ball. But you said it. Mercedes Lewis, I think, kind of by the element of surprise, was able to slip out and get a couple big splash plays last week down there in Miami. But don't be surprised if this week it is a Robert Tunyon or a DeGuara or somebody else that's able to step up. I mean, I do think if the Packers are going to win this game, they're going to be successful moving the chains and getting in the end zone. You need to run the ball, but you're also going to have to find new targets. Aaron Rodgers is going to have to find guys that are going to be open. He's going to have to find guys that maybe are his second or his third read and just find the open guy and keep moving the chains and keep moving the ball downfield. So, I think we're both on record. DeGuara has been very good in his limited snaps this year. I think in run blocking, for a lack of a better term, out of the backfield. But I'd like to see him get a little bit more involved. But Robert Tunyon is really the guy I want to circle this week as somebody against this Minnesota Vikings defense. I look at this Vikings defense. They are truly a middling defense. And I look at the inside linebackers. I look at Hunter and Kendricks and Hicks. These are all guys that can rush the passer at times, but I don't think that the Vikings are all that comfortable with them in space trying to keep up with an athletic tight end. I would love to see this as a week where Tunyon gets 5-6 receptions and really kind of blows that expectation out of the water, because I think that he is a guy who can really find the vulnerabilities in this Minnesota Vikings defense. So to your point, this could truly be a Robert Tunyon week where he finds a soft spot in the zone, beats the guy in the man, and Aaron is just kind of firing shots over the middle and Tunyon keeps the chains moving.
Yeah, absolutely. The Vikings actually giving up the second most yards per attempt in the league, behind only the Detroit Lions. So
that's remarkable, right? With a team that's got 12 wins, that's incredible that the Vikings have those stat lines.
Yeah. Now, for context, part of that is that they've been in a lot of back and forth games. They played with the lead a lot, and that's led to some of these closer games at the end. I think is for whatever reason they've allowed teams to get back into games and make these games really close at the end. So that can play into it to a degree. But on the flip side, if we can be aggressive and efficient passing the ball on first down, all of a sudden that kind of pulls guys away from the line of scrimmage. It really reduces the ability of their pass rushers to just pin their ears back and get overly aggressive, bringing extra guys. And then that might actually open some things up in the run game as well. So it's about being able to force this Vikings defense into making some second or third adjustments in this game. And so I think they're going to come out and they're going to try to stop the Packers run game, because without a run game, Packers have not shown that they have the ability to be consistent and efficient offensively all season. But that does potentially open some things up in the pass game. So we're going to need to, as you said, we can't have drops. Romeo Dobbs and Alan Lazard can't be dropping the football again like they did last week. We might need a little bit more from Randall Cobb in the pass game this week. He's been solid for us all season, but we might need more of a 5 reception for 60 to 70 yard type day from Randall Cobb this week. And so I don't want to put too much on him, but if it's not the tight ends, if Bob Tunyon can't get involved, if Aaron Jones still isn't 100%, I would say Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, too, in the pass game could get a few more looks, but that hasn't been an emphasis of this offense all season, let alone with Aaron Jones less than 100%. So right. I have a hard time seeing that as much as I'd like to see it. It doesn't seem like that's a route that this Packer coaching staff has really tried to exploit this season for whatever reason. So I don't know. I think we can go out there, do what we need to do. I have more confidence in this offense than I've had certainly a month or two ago. But without Christian Watson out there, it certainly shortens the field a little bit for this Vikings defense. They can condense things down, and Harrison Smith can fly around and come in and really try to disrupt the running game like he likes to do, and not have to worry too much about anyone beating them over the top. So in some regards, they're going to have to do that cat and mouse and try to figure out some ways to find some openings and find some holes. So it'll be interesting to see if we can kind of roll the pocket a little bit, and perhaps get DeGuara and get Bob Tunyon. I'm not saying 6-7 receptions for those guys, but even if they can get 3-4 apiece, that could be something that could make a difference in moving the chains and allowing this Packer offense to find its rhythm.
Thanks. How important is Aaron Rodgers in this game? And I know that's kind of a puff question, but some weeks the quarterback can hide. Some weeks I say hide in air quotes, folks. But some weeks the quarterback's not important. But in this kind of matchup, does Aaron have to have an A game to win this game, a B game? What? How do you feel about that?
Does he have to have an A game? No. Do you think he has to have an A game? I don't think he does. It sure be nice though. I'd love to see it. I don't know if we've gotten an A game from Aaron all season by his standards.
Right?
Yeah, I really don't. So that's I don't think I'm being groundbreaking there by saying that. He was not that great last week. He was fine, but he missed a lot of throws in that second quarter, particularly. Had Watson on that third and short. Or actually, I'm sorry, that was on fourth down, wasn't it? When they went for it. And certainly wouldn't have taken a perfect throw for that to have been a touchdown. He missed some guys on some other throws. I think he missed either Dillon or Jones pretty bad out of the backfield on another play. Just sailed a few balls. So his fundamentals just haven't really been on point. And unfortunately, I know he's had some injuries, but I think we're going to need to see some more pinpoint accuracy on some of these throws, and then the guys need to make those catches. What we can't afford is to be shooting ourselves on the foot. Those are just series and drives, drive killers when it's first and 10 from the 50-yard line, and Alan Lazard drops a wide open catch for 12 or 13 yards over the middle that would have put them in field goal range and given them a lead in the second quarter. So, or potentially they go down and score a touchdown if you move the chains there and kind of keep things going. So, those are those things that they feel big in the moment, but they're even bigger when you put it under the microscope of looking at a full 4-quarter game because you don't have that many offensive opportunities,
So true.
unfortunately. So you've got to those things all kind of add up and need to get cleaned up. So Dane, I'm going to flip the question back on you though. Like what type of performance can we get on Aaron Rodgers? I asked you this last week and the week before. Can we get vintage Aaron Rodgers performance in the last few weeks of the season? And so far, he's been fine against the Rams and the Vikings, or not the Rams and Vikings, the Rams and the Dolphins, but not vintage A level performance by any means. Maybe like B minus level performance from what I would consider for Aaron Rodgers. So, is this the week? In your eyes, that he could really raise his level of play to that vintage or that A level performance?
Yeah, probably not. If I'm being totally direct with you, Aaron hasn't had a 300-yard passing game this year. That's just not how this offense is looking. That's not what they're asking of Aaron, and that doesn't seem to be something that Aaron's really able to do right now. If I'm being real with you, but a B or a B plus performance from an Aaron Rodgers, we're grading on a curve, folks. Aaron Rodgers, MVP 4 times, right? B to B plus, they're going to win the game, I think, more likely than not. I think that means that he's going to be threading some needles. He's going to be making some plays. So that's what we're hoping for. But more than that, more than the stats, more than the touchdown passes, more than everything else, it's about how he carries himself for me. If he looks to be in it, if he looks to, we've gotten used to grumpy Aaron. We've gotten used to frustrated Aaron, I think, over the years. But if he's got a little of that swag, right? We see him tuck the ball down and try to pick up a first down. We see him pop up and beat his chest a little bit. That's an Aaron Rodgers that seems to be totally focused, trying to win the football game. It's when you see Aaron back there behind the huddle, kind of putting his arms up, shouting at the sidelines. That's always a concern to me. So I don't care so much about stats as I care about Aaron kind of just being the Rodgers that we want to see. Because I think, when he's winning football games, he's carrying himself in a certain way. And I think a lot of the Packer offense in particular feeds off of like a positive Aaron. So that's the Aaron I want to see.
Yeah, because he can still make big plays in situational moments, right? So,
Yes.
Engaged, locked in, and really allowing the game to come to him, not
Grumpy
taking,
Aaron, right?
yeah, not being grumpy Aaron, not chucking the ball downfield on first, second, and third down,
right? And then we're all freaking out at home, right? We don't need that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, Dane, we've gone over an hour. So I think,
we could go 2 hours if you want, Wags. I'm here for it.
Yeah, let's shift here and kind of look at our X factors. And this is a segment that's brought to you by Leap Spirits. Leap Spirits vodka as well as Leapin' Lemonade can be found in retail stores all over Wisconsin, as well as in restaurants. So to find Leap Spirits vodka and Leapin' Lemonade in a store or restaurant near you, go to leapspirits.com and click on Find Leap Spirits. So, Dane, looking at X Factors for this week, we know a couple of our big time X Factors may not be going this week, and Christian Watson and Keyshawn Nixon. So, who are you circling as we look at some of the other guys that could be an X Factor and make a difference and an impact on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball this week?
I go offense. I'm going to go AJ Dillon. I think AJ Dillon's getting hot. He's played really good football. He's clearly, he carries a pile. He's had really good vision. Wags, we need a big performance out of AJ Dillon. I just got done saying, I don't know if we need a performance from Aaron Rodgers. We might need a performance from AJ Dillon. I want to see him carry the pile. I want to see him catch a couple balls out of the backfield, do some good pass pro when necessary, and just be kind of at his top level, secure the ball. AJ Dillon's my X factor, my Leap Spirits X factor on offense. I think he's a supremely talented back who's getting better and better. We've seen the best out of him in the last 5 or 6 weeks. We need another huge performance at Lambeau Field cold weather, barreling over Viking defenders when they're getting tired in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think that's a really good selection there. I'm going to go with another guy that we could talk about vintage performances. I teased it just a few minutes back. Randall Cobb. Let's call him Mr. January.
Love it.
And I think this is a big moment. This is the type of game and type of moment that we bought Randall Cobb back for. Is he someone that we would want to rely on as our first or second or even third receiver over the course of an 18-week season? No, he's had some nice games this season, but I think when the chips are down, he's the guy that Aaron can rely on, be that release valve and come up with some big plays. And I think we're going to need him this week. If Christian Watson's unable to go, we might need him even if Christian Watson is able to tough it out and get out there. And so I'm looking for Randall Cobb to make an impact on this game. And if he can do that, I think that will make a significant difference in contributing to a potential Packers victory. And vintage performance from Aaron. How about a little vintage performance from Randall Cobb to go along with that?
Wags, you're telling me Randall Cobb, Jan 1, 2023 at Lambeau Field against the Minnesota Vikings. I'll take that every day of the week. I love that selection.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
good. Defensive side, I'm going to let you go first. I'm curious who you got as your Leaf Spirits X Factor on defense.
Yeah, well, I think we spent so much time talking about this defensive line. How can
Yeah.
we not look there? So I'm going to go with Devontae Wyatt. It looks like he's going to continue to be someone that will be the recipient of a bunch of more snaps this week, with Dean Lowry getting sent to the IR. And so certainly TJ Slayton will get a bump there as well. But we're going to need this young man to step up in a big way. He's been up for it, small sample size this year. So we've been singing his praises and wanting to see him get more snaps. Well, now is this big opportunity. So starting this week, let's see what type of impact he is able to make in the middle of that defense. He's going to have Kenny Clark. If we get anything close to the performance we got out of Jaron Reed last week, and TJ Slayton continue to make positive contributions, Devontae Wyatt, I'll tell you what, could be that level of true X factor on this defensive line. You said it. He can get pressure on the quarterback from up the middle with his pass rushing ability and his ability to shed blockers and to get upfield and try to get after the quarterback. Only had half a tackle in the box score last week, but both of us are saying our eyes told us that he was more involved in making some of those plays or initiating some of those stops at or behind the line of scrimmage. And so Devontae Wyatt, for that reason, I'm excited to see what he can do with a more full complement of snap opportunities. And if he's able to take advantage of it, it could really, really, truly be an X factor for this defense starting this week.
I think that's a terrific selection, Wags, and such an important position too. It's not necessarily sexy, but that defensive line position, if you've got a guy who can lock things down and get after the quarterback, it's so important. I'm going to go opposite. I'll tell you what, for my Leaf Spirits defensive player of Week 17, I'm going to go with the old vet Adrian Amos. Adrian Amos is a guy that I have been critical of at times this year. I think that he's lost a step. I've said it. I love Adrian, but he just looks to be a little out of sorts, and I think that a little slow at times this year. But I think he's got some left in him, and I want to see Adrian Amos play a vintage Adrian Amos performance. We're going to need to try to take away Justin Jefferson wherever we can. I expect Jair to play a healthy dose on Jefferson this week. I'm sure that he's been in Coach Barry's office every day saying, hey, man, I'm going to play this guy this week, right? But he's going to need some help over the top. I want to see Adrian Amos do what we need him to do. I want to see Adrian Amos get a turnover. I want to see him step up and do the things that we need from him. So for all of those reasons, Adrian Amos is going to be my X factor, Leaf Spirits defensive player Week 17. And if he plays well, I think we can win a football game.
All right. I think that's a great selection as well. And certainly we need to make sure that Justin Jefferson isn't outrunning our too high coverage the way
Yes,
that Tyreek Hill
exactly.
was able to do last week.
Exactly.
So if Adrian Amos can kind of button that up, that would be fantastic. Dane, I'm going to let you lead this week on the score predictions. What have you got? This is a big time moment, big time game for the Packers if they're going to have any opportunity to get in the playoffs.
So I read somewhere this week that the Minnesota Vikings are 11-0 in one-score games this year. I think the Packers are about to make them 11-1. I think that it's going to be a 38-34 Green Bay Packer victory, high-scoring
Whoa.
game. I'm going big this week, Wags, at Lambeau Field in the cold. I think the offense goes off. I think that Rodgers has a really nice performance. I don't think the Vikings defense is any chance against this Packers offensive line, and they're playing catch up most of the game. It gets close near the end because the Vikings play this catch up type of game. But for all those reasons and all those reasons more, the Green Bay Packers are going to win this game 38-34. Packers win. They go on to Week 18 and face the Detroit Lions at Lambeau Field.
38 points, huh? Well,
Yeah,
that's
I'm going
that's
big.
it's a lot of points for this Packer offense. But
I know.
I'll take. We said it last week. We'd take the win, and no matter how it happens. Certainly wasn't always pretty last week, and we took the win no matter what. So
Yeah.
I would take it if that's how we have to do it. I've got a slightly different game flow. I think the Packers defense can continue with this takeaway train from last week. Sometimes it's funny. There's no rhyme or reason for when takeaways happen. That shouldn't be a momentum thing, but I'm just going to say that this is a week that the Packers get at least 3 takeaways from this Vikings offense. And so that can really put a damper on what the Vikings are able to do in terms of putting up points. I actually think I don't know why. I just, for whatever reason, and I hope I'm not going to eat my words on this, but I think the Packers are going to win this game comfortably. 31-21 is the final that I have. 3 turnovers. The Packer defense is going to force, and that's going to put the Packers in position to get some points. I think they'll convert 2 of those into touchdowns this week. Packer offense may not be crisp for all 4 quarters, but it's going to start with some of those takeaways from the defense. Will be more efficient in the red zone, and that'll be enough to kind of, I think, cruise. Kirk has been so up and down, Kirk Cousins, in some of the cold weather Lambeau games. I'm just going to be optimistic that this is going to be one of those down games. The Vikings can go ahead and keep their perfect record in one-score games because this isn't going to be one of them. Packers take care of business and roll into Week 18 with a chance to secure a playoff berth against the Lions with it all on the line.
Man, I love it, Wags, and you're getting me fired up now. That's why this pod's going so damn long tonight. We're talking about Packer wins here. I love it. And John in the comments says 27-10 Packers. Love the optimism. We're feeling it this week, Wags. Are you fired up? Because we're playing Packer football, meaningful games, Week 17 at Lambeau Field.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, folks, thanks so much for joining us this evening. Have a very safe and fun and happy New Year's. And let's get another Packer win New Year's Day on Sunday. And it's exciting. The Packers continue to play meaningful football here down the stretch, and that we can continue to talk about a potential run into the playoffs. So let's keep that going here this week. And then it's all going to be set up, hopefully, for a storybook ending to this regular season in Week 18. So, folks, thanks so much. As always, be legendary and go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.
Every year I know we gonna go hard. We been that team ever since Bart started. All my cheese heads go Pack Go. Ain't show with no mercy, cutting no slack, no. I ain't a bad sport and I'll even wish you good luck. Only thing I will